Good afternoon and welcome to the live session on RE Grid integration, embrace and accelerate the way forward in the current crisis. On behalf of organizers, Clarin Energy and IT Media, I thank you all for your participation and we welcome you all to the new normal of the industry gathering, networking, and thought sharing. We bring to you series of live webinars, which are 8 webinars from the month of April to June. For more details, you can log on to Powergen India and Indian Utility Week website. Today we have industry experts from grid operations, renewables, and T&D space to deliberate discussion on some of the pressing issues in RE grid integration. Rapid growth in renewables poses challenges for grid operations and has various implications on the financial structure of DISCOMs, consumer tariffs, and incumbent power generating companies. With the ambitious RE targets that requires an annual growth of 25%, there is a need to address the issues in grid integration, challenges for scaling RE, and other issues that will impact the growth trajectory. We begin with the presentation by Mr. Anurag Mishra. He's the energy team leader with USAID. He'll give a presentation on the overview of the subject and broad challenges of RE grid integration. Our panel of experts will address the questions around the long-term solutions, grid balancing, and flexibility across the value chain. To start with, I would like to introduce Mr. Anurag Mishra, who will also moderate the panel discussion with the experts. He has over 20 years of experience in development sector, covering climate change, energy, economic growth, sustainability, regional cooperation, environmental issues, and key infrastructure sectors like energy highways, industrial estates, and urban development. I welcome Mr. Anurag Mishra and I request you to please take the discussions further. Thank you.
Thank you, Havandi. Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Anurag Mishra, team leader with USAID and moderator for today's webinar. So on behalf of the organizers and our guest speakers today, we hope that you and your families are well and safe. These are extraordinary times and the energy sector has been tested unprecedented by way the COVID pandemic. But I also see several bright spots emerge during the last 2 months of the lockdown in India. And I hope that with that kind of a positive side of it, we can keep seeing this sector grow. I'm honored to be part of today's webinar on grid integration, embrace and accelerate the way forward in current crisis. So before we start the panel discussion, let me take you through the introduction of the topic, and I will be kind of a quick in this presentation so as to allow our expert speakers to provide more insight in this. So with this, I'll start the presentation. Next slide, please. So we all know about where do we stand in terms of renewable energy installed capacity, almost 90 gigawatt of 370 gigawatts of overall electricity or the power installed capacity. It's largely composed of solar and wind, which are like mostly around 37 gigawatt and 32 gigawatt and growing very fast, followed by biomass, small hydro, and rooftop solar. What it really means, today we stand around 23% of total installed capacity is from renewables. And India stands top amongst in solar and the wind generation capacities globally. But we have a big target to achieve. India has set a target of 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022, of which 100 gigawatt will come from solar and 60 gigawatt will come from wind. But India is not stopping in 2022. There are even more ambitious targets. We're talking about 455 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030, which will increase the share of total renewables significantly. And that is what we're discussing, that as we are kind of increasing the share of renewables into our system, what it really means and how do we manage that. Next slide, please. So this is another slide which kind of represent two things, and it's a major thing to consider. Now, renewable energy has become a mainstream source. Earlier, we were seeing renewables as a non-conventional source or alternate source, but now that has changed significantly, and it is for two reasons. One is that now it has become cheaper compared to the conventional power. You look into the recent tariffs, both solar and wind, they are much below compared to the average discount procurement cost of 3.6 rupees. As we go forward, even the difference between the new coal generation and the renewables will increase over time. It's already cost effective compared to a new conventional generation. And what that has led to is a big shift in how we are adding renewables into the system. As you see the graph on the right hand side bottom, in last 3 years, almost 75% of new capacity came from renewables. Whereas in earlier years, the case was just opposite. Renewables was just adding 5–10% of new capacity. And this is not just India. Globally, the recent numbers which came from IRENA shows that 75% of new capacity added globally in 2019 came from renewables, which was incidentally equivalent to 175 gigawatts of renewables. Next slide, please. But what it does to system, and that's where we talk about the grid integration issues, and that is becoming a challenge. Renewables bring in three specific things. One is the variability. Most of the generation happens when the resource is available. You can only generate solar power during daytime. Wind is seasonal. Second is, while it is variable, it is also uncertain. It is very difficult to know how much of renewables can be generated in a specific time frame. While we know that the resource is going to be available, you may have a sunny day, but like today in Delhi, it's kind of cloudy. So we could have not projected the actual generation today, knowing that there are going to be changes in that. And the third is it is locational specific, which means we have good resources in certain parts of the country, whereas the demand of power is in other parts, which brings the issue of how do we bring this renewables to the growth centers or the demand centers of energy. Next slide, please. This really shows that we can manage the variability up to a certain extent. But as we saw in the first slide, India has a really ambitious target. We're looking at 40% and above of new kind of overall capacity coming from renewables. And that is where you will see that as that we scale up renewables, the variability becomes even bigger issue in integrating into the grid. Next slide, please. There are several solutions to this, and I will not go into detail, but this is just kind of stacking the typical options which are available to us to manage this variability. And they're also kind of stacked in relation to the cost. The cost is also changing over time, and we're seeing that some of these solutions are becoming more and more cost effective. But overall, the solutions buckets are around system operations, markets, load management, flexible generation, network or grid management, and then energy storage technologies. Next slide, please. India has already taken efforts across all the solutions which I highlighted before. We have a big transmission planning process going on where to connect large sources of renewables like wind and solar parks with the demand centers through a dedicated transmission planning and interconnection to that. There are technical standards which are coming out to support further integration, whether that is through the technical standards for connectivity to the grid or the review of the Indian Electricity Grid Code. We have some good examples of flexibility which are emerging, especially from our existing resources. We have some of the examples where NTPC and Gujarat were able to kind of run their coal plants flexibly and show that these are viable options both technically and financially. We are also looking into managing hydro resources and existing gas fleet to provide that needed flexibility to the system. Forecasting and scheduling and imbalances, again, a big issue. We have a lot of efforts going on through REMC's new regulations, which provides for us for better forecasting and scheduling, and both incentives and penalties for that. And the last piece is to drive more ancillary services, balancing reserves through markets or other kind of mechanisms which can provide for flexibility which is needed with the expansion of renewable into the grid. Next slide, please. And beyond these options, there are also other options which we are looking at, and they kind of relate to better long-term and medium-term resource planning by DISCOM, so that DISCOMs can match the supply with the demand and accordingly manage more renewables without or less requirement of external support. We can also look into reducing the variability of the generation at the generation point through hybrid projects, large as well as distributed renewable energy. And the last piece is the innovation which is happening in the procurement side of it, where the new time block tenders, round the clock tenders are also helping in reducing the variability which is coming from the generation point, but then also trying to manage the demand based on the supply of different renewable sources which can match the demand. So there are a number of solutions which are being tested, implemented across India. And today we are going to discuss that with our esteemed panel members here. So this is what my presentation is. But before we go into our detailed discussion, I'd like to mention that Mr. Bende, Managing Director, MP Transco, was unable to join us today. He has some other official exigency, and he has conveyed his deepest regards and inconvenience to the audience. So now moving on, taking forward our deliberations on this important topic. Today we have experts representing key stakeholders. I'm really happy to see that we have most of the key stakeholders present here today, which involves planning, development, and the management of renewable energy on the grid. Let me allow me to introduce you with our first panelist, Mr. Narasimhan, Director System Operation, POSOCO. Mr. Narasimhan has decades of experience in power system operation spread across CEA, Power Grid, POSOCO, and has contribution to several expert committees at government and regulatory levels in areas of system operation, grid integration of RE resources, and optimization of institution building. Our second panelist is Mr. Mohit Bhargava, Executive Director, Renewables, NTPC. Mr. Bhargava has been instrumental in developing a strong pipeline of projects and taking steps to make NTPC compete and win in RE space. He is also spearheading at the initiative of e-mobility and working on creating a green hydrogen business vertical of NTPC. Next speaker panelist is Mr. Abhishek Ranjan, AVP System Operation, BSES Rajdhani Private Limited. Mr. Ranjan has launched program and initiatives with BRPL like community rooftop solar, behavioral energy efficiency, and various student awareness programs on climate change, integration, and energy conservation. I'm happy to introduce our next panelist, Mr. B.B. Mehta, Chief Engineer, GETCO, SLDC. Mr. Mehta is actively involved in renewable energy integration, system stability, electricity market economics, energy efficiency, and smart grid for power system operation, and has also played key role in implementation of supervisory control and data acquisition, phasal management unit for wide area monitoring system, and renewable energy forecasting solutions. The next panelist is Mr. Gurpreet Chugh. He's Managing Director, ICF. Mr. Chugh has led consulting engagement for international energy majors and provided advisory services across oil and gas, coal, power, and renewable energy sectors. He has recently supported the World Bank and SECI, Solar Energy Corporation of India, and their first energy storage project in India by establishing the feasibility of 160 megawatt wind solar hybrid with energy storage in Andhra Pradesh. So I extend all my expert call out a very warm welcome on behalf of the organizers. Welcome you all. So Before we jump into the panel discussion, I'd like to draw your attention to the poll question we have today, and you can send your responses to that through online system. The question is, I think the key factor affecting the RE generation, RE grid integration will be, and the options are reduction in output of coal plants, robust power market with option for DISCOMs to optimize its long-term conventional PPA portfolio, technical feasibility of grid integration, financial health of DISCOMs, flexible operation of power system value chain. So we request you to provide your response to this poll question as we go through our discussion, the moderator discussion, which I like to start with Mr. Narsiman, Director System Operation POSOCO. Can I see Mr. Narsiman on the screen, please? All right, thank you. So, Mr. Narsiman, my first question to you is that given that 2030 RGate targets, we're looking at a huge target, what actions should the country take today, and what changes is POSOCO introducing in system operation for large-scale integration of renewable energy into the grid? And if in your response, you can also draw on any lessons from the 5th April 9 p.m. event, where India managed a large and sudden variation in the electricity demand. Over to you, Mr. Narsiman.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Anurag, for the introduction and the opening remarks. We all know that RE is here to stay with us, be it from sustainability considerations, be it from energy security, and be it from economy. I think your slides covered that very well. The costs also, they are falling rapidly. So RE is here to stay from these three dimensions at least. And while we are focusing on these three dimensions, it is also important that we don't lose sight of the other two dimensions, and that is reliability and resilience, because both of these are essentially in the nature of a public service. And so whatever we do, it's important that we focus on these two attributes only, and attributes too, so that the whole ecosystem that we need to put in place must ensure reliability and resilience. In fact, I am reminded of the famous quote by George C. Loher. He was one of the power system specialists. In the 1965, after the 1965 Northeast US blackout, that was the first time that they started doing computer simulations, and he was closely involved in that exercise. So one thing which he has mentioned, which we always quote, that when the laws of physics and the laws of economics and the laws of society collide, we have to keep in mind that physics always wins. And that's the reason why it's important that we try to ensure that all the physics which goes into reliability and resilience, we ensure that. And while doing so, I had 6 things in mind, which we as a system operator in POSOCO, we always try to have a very good idea of these things and try to influence these 6 areas. The first and foremost is technical standards for connectivity to the grid. It's important because with wind and solar, we are having a huge mix of power electronic devices that are coming into the system, and very few of us are very intimate with these power electronic devices. So how these devices behave when there are faults in the system, that's very important. In fact, the September 2016 incident in Southwest Australia, and last year the August 2019 incident in UK, that's basically a wake-up call that we need to be focused on ensuring that these standards keep pace. And it's important to act now, because 2030, 2040, when we are talking about 70-80% of renewable energy in the grid, it's important that it's these standards and the compliance to these standards which would ensure that the grid remains reliable and resilient. So that's the first point on technical standards. The second aspect that we need to look at is basically the modeling and simulation for the entire all India grid connected with its neighbors. And when we talk about simulation, it doesn't mean a snapshot based simulation. It has to be a full 8760 hours. That would actually bring out the generation flexibility and transmission flexibility requirements truly. And when I say generation flexibility, we must look at all the resources, be it coal flexibility, be it hydro flexibility, and use of gas flexibility, as well as storage assets. All four have to be seen in close coordination, and we can't lose sight of only this is important. So we need to do a lot of work on coal flexibility. While certain initiatives have been taken, but it's important that at the intrastate level also this penetrates to a larger extent. And when I talk about hydro flexibility, it's time we take a relook at the new hydro also that is built out, whether they are made more flexible through number of units. That's one. And so, when we talk about transmission flexibility, we have to look at a host of HVDC, FACTS devices, synchronous condensers. How would they need to be fitted in the entire scheme of things? So the third aspect of reliability and resilience is, of course, the forecasting and scheduling. And when I say forecasting and scheduling, it's for both load as well as RE resources. And it's a short-term load forecasting. So it's good that over the last 3-4 years, we have had a number of forecast service providers in the area of wind and solar. That would help us in the long run. And till we reduce the forecast, till we improve the forecast accuracy, then that's where, then that's the key to integrating a large quantum variable. And we are doing a lot of work in this area. We are still on the learning curve, but definitely we would come up to the expectations. And fourth would be reserves, because there would still be uncertainty. So we need generation reserves, be it primary, secondary, tertiary, frequency control. So we need reserves of all kinds, and whether we bring it through a market or a regulated based system, that's a separate question. But the fact is that we need frequency control ancillary services. Similarly, reactive control ancillary services, that's also required. It's basically a location based. Reactive power control is essentially location based, so you can't have competition in that area because it's basically location based. And the third is, of course, when you're talking about resilience, black start resources also we need to have. So reliability and resilience, it would be taken care of through these reserves and black start resources. The fifth component is visualization. Such a large grid, how are we able to visualize this at the control centers, and whether there's adequate situational awareness? There's a huge explosion in the amount of data that we have. And one more important thing is that the average age of system operators at the control centers, that's fast coming down. And you might have operators who might not have even seen a gas power plant or a coal-fired power plant, but they would see more and more of renewables. So that generation change also, and the visualization and situational awareness, that becomes very important. And artificial intelligence and other tools would have to be increasingly used. And while we are talking about all these 5 attributes, let us also not forget distribution, the 6th. Today we have what Anurag's slide showed, just about 2.5 gigawatt of rooftop solar. So unlike other countries where you had more of rooftop solar rather than large solar parks and wind farms, in India we have very less of rooftop solar. So it's time to, there'll be an explosion in rooftop solar, and it's important that we soon have a better view of the distribution system through distribution system operators. So these are the 6 attributes that I feel must be put into place so that reliability and resilience we can ensure for a grid which has a large penetration of RE. And at POSOCO, we are working towards ensuring these. There are some over which we have a direct control, some over which we have little degree of influence, but the point is we generally try to keep these issues on the radar. And once you have all this, then whatever markets that you have, they must complement reliability and resilience. So that was the pointed answer to Anurag's first question. The second part, what he asked about, what are the lessons learned from the 9th April, 5th April event, 9 p.m. 9 minutes. So I would just highlight 3 lessons, main lessons learned. Of course, we have a detailed report on that, which is available on our website. The first and foremost is that the amount of flexibility that we could harness in this entire exercise, we had about 60 hours to prepare, but the fact that we could harness about 28 to 30 gigawatt of flexibility for this 9-minute exercise, that was one very good lesson learned. And we could do that because of the layered structure that we have for ensuring security. The National Load Dispatch Center, the Regional Load Dispatch Center, and the State Load Dispatch Center. This institutional mechanism was of very great help in handling this event. And of course, the weakness also came out that, yes, at the distribution level, we need to have a distribution system operator so that we know our loads more intimately, how much of it is agriculture, how much of it is illumination, residential, and so on. So that's the lesson learned. And the third important thing is that if your forecast has a very high error, you need to have double, triple the quantum of reserves. So while we forecast about 12 to 15 gigawatt of lighting load going off, we had about 28 gigawatt to 29 gigawatt of reserves, excluding the thermal, and that was what that saved the day. So the important point in the context of RE integration is that, yes, you need to maintain reserves, and on days when you expect more forecast error, yes, you would be required to keep more reserves in the interest of grid security. So that's all, Anurag. I would hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Narasimhan, and also for highlighting I think there is an echo. If some everybody can put their mute, please. Thank you. The issue is only, am I hearing the echo or? Okay, now it's now gone. The kind of a regional balancing reserves and how do we harness the regional resources and a better understanding of those things is critical. And the learnings from the April 5th event, and congratulations to POSOCO for managing it successfully. So let me move on to our second panelist, Mr. Mohit Bhargava. And Mr. Bhargava, NTPC has the advantage of large and diverse portfolio of generation resources. So how NTPC is utilizing these resources to reduce the availability of renewable energy which is coming to the system? And if you can also speak to, as a kind of a developer and an investor into RE projects, any impact of COVID-19 you have seen on your projects or in the sector, if you would like to share with the participants here. Over to you, Mr. Bhargava.
Thank you, Anurag, and thanks to Clarion Energy and ITIL Media for having me. First of all, let me compliment you, Anurag, that you put out all the facts very in a very good and succinct manner, which actually lays down the issues and the prognosis for the RE sector. So what I'll do is I'd like to take the second question first, because COVID is alive and in front of us and everyone is quite aware of what's happening. Yes, in the initial period, especially after the lockdown started in the end of March, there was significant demand drop, which of course POSOCO knows much better than us. And during that period, incidentally, there was a lot of curtailment. But more important than curtailment became the liquidity issue, because the fund flow, even at the distribution level, at the DISCOM level, became an issue. So, while renewable has been given the status of must-run, even then, in view of absolutely shortfall in demand or lack of demand, curtailment had to be there. And that is why there were issues. But I think over the last 1 week or so, as the temperature has gone above 45 degrees in Delhi, and I'm sure it's the pretty same in many parts of the country, the demand has picked up. And as per the information we have, we actually touched about 160 gigawatts yesterday, and quite possibly we'll be exceeding that number today as well. So from that point of view, I think the curtailment issue is now more or less getting addressed on the renewable side. I'm not saying on the thermal side, obviously, flexibility and all those issues are there. So curtailment issues are probably a bit addressed now. But the issue of liquidity remains. And as probably all of us know, government has taken steps to infuse almost 90,000 crores of liquidity into the system through PFC REC. So I hope that will alleviate the problems being faced by the developers, generators, and all these people to a large extent. So let's try to come to the second question, or rather the first question which you raised. I'd just like to refer to about 2 years ago, Government of India came out with a policy. It was flexibility in scheduling of thermal power stations to reduce emissions. And I think the main import of that policy was that since now the renewable resources, the cost of the renewable resources has become so competitive that in many cases they're actually well below the variable charges of the thermal power stations, more specifically the load center stations, where the coal cost along with the freight cost is very high. So the policy allows that any generating company, if they have a schedule for running the thermal power stations, and if they have access to solar or wind, which is cheaper than the variable charges of the thermal power, they can use that power to substitute the thermal power. So the idea was twofold. One, of course, is very clear: reduce emissions because you're not burning coal during that period. And two, it was also felt that this way, the grid operator, which is POSOCO in this case, as well as the generating company, for example, which we are, we get a very clear picture and we are active participants in the whole integration process. So this was supposed to be a process which will not only help the grid, it will also help us, and it will lead to more sustainable consumption of power. So under that program, we are in the process of setting up solar-based plants, which we hope to start, operations sometimes by the end of October, which we'll be able to use for replacing our thermal power stations as and when the schedules come. So these are the two important areas. One, of course, how we bring solar power into the picture, and we take care of the flexibility also. Probably I'll just like to quickly add that this does not mean that because as NTPC, we are also having a huge thermal power base. So we'll also have to do a lot of work on the other side, which I think partly Mr. Narasimhan was also talking about, bringing in flexibility into my system. So it's going to be an overall exercise as to how flexibility comes in. So over to you, Anurag. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhargava. So let me move on to our next panelist, Mr. Abhishek Ranjan, and you represent a distribution utility. So my question to you is, what is the role of better resource planning by utilities, which can help in integration of renewable energy? And what are the limitations of the existing planning processes and how that can be improved to meet the future needs?
Thank you, Anurag, for your questions. And first of all, I would like to thank Iten Energy and Clarion Energy to having me on board here. and good afternoon to all my co-panelists and all the listeners, viewers today. Going to your two questions, yes, I represent BICS Rajdhani. It's a distribution company in city of Delhi, and we are serving consumers almost 43% of the entire city of Delhi, the largest discom in the city in terms of number and the load served. Having said that, yeah, the two challenges that you have talked about. The first question was how the resource planning is going to help in RE integration. And the second part is what is the limitation in the current processes as we do the resource planning. May I take the second question first, and then I'll go to the first question.
Sure.
The way we do the resource planning today, when we talk about the resources, it's about the entire, not only the power resources, but also the distribution network resources. So we talk about the network and power both. Now, if you talk about the distribution side flexibility or demand side flexibility, that is fairly non-existent, as I would say, because primarily it is a unidirectional. But thanks to solar, rooftop solar, embedded solar, a bidirectional thing has come up, which is slowly picking up. Rooftop solar is slowly picking up. Like for example, in city of Delhi, we have already crossed 160 megawatt. In our area, it is about 64 megawatt. Very small, but there are states in India, like for example, Gujarat, who are leading a lot in the embedded rooftop. What I'm trying to say is the way we do the planning of the distribution network is on the basis of the peak load met. So we are not talking about the complete entire load duration curve of the asset. And we are just looking at the peak, which happened maybe for only a few minutes or few hours in the entire year. And that is leading to a lot of overcapacity and unbalanced load across the seasons, which is also creating problem of underutilized assets and thereby many a times higher technical losses. Now on the power planning side, again, the power being planned is on the basis of peak demand. And the peak demand, if you talk about the low duration curve, the peak demand which is taken as the instantaneous peak demand or even the 15-minute average. That peak is also maybe for a few hours in the entire year. For example, Delhi made a peak of 7.4 gigawatt last year, and that was for a few minutes. And if you talk about 7,000 megawatt plus how many hours Delhi met, that was also for a few hours in the entire year, maybe 7 or 10 hours. And similarly, this is the figure for maybe India as also, when we talk about meeting at pan-India level. So what we are trying to say over here is we need to do the resource planning in a way that the supply side scenario is more close to the demand side, and so as to not to over and under plan. So that is the limitation as of now that we are facing. Now coming to the fact of what should we do in terms of integrated resource planning, which is going to help me integrate with the RE. When I say RE, we talk about two sources. A, which is embedded inside the distribution system, distributed energy resource, or solar rooftop, or maybe tomorrow we'll have micro wind. Maybe tomorrow have behind the meter battery storages coupled with the solar rooftop. And B, it is about the conventional RE, I should say, which is connected and being fed to the discoms through the ISTS, interstate transmission system, the solar farms, or the wind farms which are outside. Now, for many practical purposes, they are akin to any conventional sources because the power is being routed through the whole transmission and the distribution network and sub-transmission network before being fed to the distribution network. So the challenges over there is the intermittency and variability, which Mr. Narasimhan also spoke about. And this leads to a problem in the maintenance of the schedule. And also, when we talk about scheduling in India, the discoms are responsible for self-scheduling. So that challenge comes in where the self-scheduling, due to the error or meet in the wind and solar forecasting, intraday and also day-ahead problems are there, due to which the schedule is not being adhered to and the deviations are being made as far as grid code is concerned. How can we do that? So A, better forecasting, but then there is a limit up to which the forecasting can be done better. I mean, 10%, 15%, whatever, in case of wind forecasting. Beyond that, we have to plan that error. And how it can be planned is, as we are doing in India, we are trying to do, for example, we are talking about the balancing market or the ancillary services market, where in fast ramping reserves, which we saw the demonstration on the 5th of April. fast ramping reserves, including hydro, gas, and coal by that order. And then now the storages, chemical storages like battery coming up. That is going to help a lot the distribution companies in balancing that. More so in the embedded resources part, the demand side flexibility, including storages, which has to couple up with the solar. Technical studies, like somebody was asking a question about the reverse power flow in the grid due to the grid becoming the power, the distribution energy resources being bidirectional. I mean, the consumers is becoming a prosumer. So the system of the protection in the grid, relay settings of the distribution transformer, or even the power transformer, 11 kV feeders, they are being worked upon. The study is being done as to what extent it has to be done. For example, in Delhi, we did a study along with MP, Bhopal, up to what level you can allow the penetration of the rooftop solar without changing the current fabric of the distribution system. So that means no additional capex, which has to be a burden on the consumer. So we came out with the figure, some report was there. So similarly, the studies was done as to what has to be changed in the production systems. And there are several studies, not only in India, but also abroad. So now MNRE is working on that, how to change the configuration of the smart inverters, so that making them more agile and flexible, making them more flexible in terms of grid security and allowing the net metering or the bidirectional flow of the energy in a more flexible way. Apart from this, the demand response or the automated demand response coupled with these DERs going to play a very, very important role. So therefore, the demand forecasting and thereby net demand forecasting along with the demand response as a resource has to play a vital role in the integration of renewable energy generation. So I'll pause here. Over to you, Anurag.
Thank you, Abhishek. If I just can request you to stay on for one more question. There's a follow-up question to this, and you highlighted a lot of demand side flexibility which a DISCOM can provide to overall system and can benefit with integration of renewables, but then also promote more distributed renewables, in a way helping both the end of it. And Mr. Narasimhan, in his kind of a talk, highlighted that he felt the need for a distribution system operator. So if you have any comment on that, whether such a kind of a mechanism will further help DISCOM operations, but then also help overall management of the system from the national grid to the state grid to the distribution grid.
Yeah, POSOCO is the national grid operator of India, as we all know. And we have seen the demonstration of the strength of POSOCO in managing centrally and single-handedly all the flexible resources in the country to successfully meet 32 gigawatt of load fall and then load rise also. So that shows that our complete flexible system and the TSO, or the transmission system operator of India, they are capable of doing. Going forward, there has to be transition of the similar pace in the DISCOM. So DISCOM transitions to a distribution system operator. When you talk about distribution system operator, this is not only serving the load or a passive serving. This is not about that. This is about maintaining the complete diversity in the consumer base. And when you talk about that, so onboarding of all the flexible resources behind the meter or front of the meter in the distribution grid, maybe 400 volts and below, has to be there. There could be also at 11 kV, because 11 kV consumers are also there, at C&I consumers, that is commercial and industrial consumers. So the idea is the challenge here is that you have to mingle and manage a lot more heterogeneity by the DSOs compared to a TSO, where things might be more organized because the DSOs are few in number. But when you turn to a DSO managing, maybe when you talk about Delhi, maybe 6-7 million or more than that kind of consumers are there. So managing that kind of diversity would be a challenge, but then it is an opportunity. So the role of DSO turns out to be more and more tech savvy, more and more IT driven, wherein the consumers are in constant touch with the distribution platform. And therefore, anytime, whenever this flexibility has to be called upon, there has to be a stochastic study of how much flexibility is already there. For example, for the TSO, it was very easy. And I have seen a very splendid report published by POSOCO on the website, wherein the interstate generating stations, what is the flexibility, what is the quantum and ramp rate, you talk about the lead time, you talk about the adjustability, all the three attributes, they are beautifully described, and there is a good repository of it. But in terms of the DSO, that flexibility is not that much clear and defined. So what needs to be done is, whenever we have onboarded such, we have to do a stochastic process wherein we find out how much of that will be actually dispatchable during the DR event, for example. So DSO's role is a bit complex, but then it has to go that way, because the democratization of electricity is happening, and therefore TSO-DSO relationship has to go very strong. And in terms of interaction, IT-based, integrated, for example, we are vocal and we are submitting before the Honorable Commission that integrating scheduling software should be brought in. NOAR, National Open Access Register, NOAR is in works, for example. So that kind of relationship wherein the visibility is there, because there will be no time for telephonic chattering with the consumers in order to invoke the flexibility. It has to be automated. So that is a big challenge, and that's where we have to jump on.
Thank you, Abhishek, for your response. Let me invite a few comments from our other panelists, Mr. Mehta. And Mr. Mehta, my question to you is the balancing resources are must for managing the grid with the high penetration of variable renewable energy. So if you can share your thoughts around how state should plan for balancing resources. Second is also there have been successful experiments showing that the existing thermal plants can also be operated flexibly. So if you can share your experience from Gujarat, what has been kind of a success, and what are the factors which led to that success for managing that process? Over to you, Mr. Mehta.
Thank you, Anur. Good afternoon, everybody. Sir, what happens that the state which is rich in RE is very poor in balancing. This is the fact. So it's really difficult to manage the renewable within the state with available balancing resource of the state. To me, truly speaking, as a technical person in the grid management, whatever balancing resource are at the disposal of each state should be made a national asset and to be deployed as and when required by the respective state. There may be some charges, there may be some levies or duties, but without that, say overnight, we all know that balancing resource cannot be constructed overnight. So this is one of the view to be looked after, and we have to give a good thought on that. So we have to make the all flexible resources as a national one entity, and it is to be deployed like that. What happens that, sir, that the balancing resource available with the state, it has to be planned in 2-3 ways. One is that we have to study, we have to take a call. What are the existing resources and how much I can change the flexibility therein by refurbishing something. Say many thermal plants available with us. They rightly put question number 2 to me, where with the help of USAID, we have changed some mechanism, and we are able to, with that refurbishing, we are able to take the tech minimum of the Wanatbori unit number 3 and Upa unit number 4, and it has helped us a great way. So my point will be that as a state level, whatever existing resources are there, a technical study is to be carried out to convert them as a balancing resource with a refurbishing, and probably the cost thereof to be passed on or can be funded through PSTF or any such funding mechanism. Another thing, say many plants are upcoming, many gas-based stations, many thermal plants are upcoming of many states, not in Gujarat but other state. I understand hydro projects are also coming. So there we have to take a call before we approve the project. We have to see that how much flexibility, how much it can be used for balancing purpose. And right from the beginning, we need to have a technology investment in such a project so that it will be used, because say Moto 450 GW is still there. So a time will come when this plant is ready, it has to face this challenge only. So it will help us in that way. And balancing resources with upcoming RE project is also a need of time. These days we are seeing so many secret tender with the hybrid, with the round the clock constant power. So this is one of the takeaway that RE project itself will deliver with the flexible, not flexible, but RE project itself will give me the constant power, or RE project will harness its intermittency in its own, and it will deliver me what I desire, what I want in different parts of the time and day. So I think these 3 points will give us a, from the state perspective, will give us a fair idea to manage the grid with the penetration of variable renewable energy with respect to planning in the state. As far as second question is concerned, that our experiment shows existing thermal plant can be operated, flexibility to provide grid flexibility, and Gujarat experience. Sir, that is a good question. We have converted 2 of our thermal project to 10 megawatt, and we are able to operate quite less than 10 minimum standard also. The heat rate and the efficiency of the plant has improved. Even the variable cost of that project has been put aside, and it is now independent entity in a basket of other units. So we are able to use it. Unfortunately, last couple of months, earlier we were passing through the low demand scenario. Due to this corona, we did not got enough demand in the grid, and this does not fall under the merit. So one of the unit is still on bar. Probably in a day or two, it will also be put aside. Now, you know, end of the May or probably last week of May and June are the high RE or high wind season. We expect to have around 90 million or more than that wind energy in the Gujarat state itself. And unfortunately, due to this COVID-19, the lockdown, the industrial demand has not gone up. There was a small question also in the panel that what is the profit we did. Not Anurag will ask somebody else to answer. I will give my views only. So my answer to that is no. We have no, sir. We have not done any profit. Unfortunately, we lost our business. Say in any distribution company, there are 3 segments of the power transaction. One is industrial, one is domestic and commercial, one is agriculture. So commercial and industrial are some where we get some money or the profit. And they were under lockdown, and we were at the disposal of domestic and agriculture. And people knew that I cannot cut their connection. They never paid it. You know, otherwise Gujarat is a very cash rich with our discoms. But we find it really difficult to manage the cash flow because we, our almost 42,000 crore rupees revenue per annum, we did not receive around 3,500 crore for this month and previous month also. So let us put aside, but this is the fact, we did not did any profit out of this. And the renewable reach season, now it has started. It is post-COVID rather. It was not during the month of March or April. Anyway, the third question, that what we should do to develop the existing balancing resource like thermal hydro waste to support the renewable energy. So let us make it more flexible, more versatile, which will have a quick startup, quick shutdown, and if required, we need to invest for that. We are working for the more technical minimum parameter for one of our place-based project in Uttarakhand near Surat. So that will bring some more megawatt at a disposal of the grid operator. Last but not least, very important, pumped hydro station is a need of time. We need to use them. Fortunately, unfortunately, in Gujarat itself, we have around 1500 megawatt of pumped hydro station built, constructed, tested, found okay, but not in service. 1200 megawatt central project, multi-state beneficiary project of Sardar Sarovar, 200 into 6 machine, not in service. Our own state-owned, Janko-owned 300 megawatt machine, not in service. So we need to take a call, and one should be answerable for that. If Janko find it difficult to manage it, we have to support them. Say there is a member hydro at CE level, at MOP level also there is a secretary hydro. So this is what we need to take a call. Say we are very keen about knowing each and every parameter of wind turbine, solar panel, forecasting thereof. But the thing which is in our front, our forehead, I think we need to take a call, and we have to ensure that such huge asset constructed with the public money, with a huge money has been invested in, and it is a need of time. Let us put them in operation. I think with all these things, we will able to harness the renewable energy more in a better way, and we'll have a green footprint for the years to come, and we'll sail the boat very successfully. Thank you, Anurag.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta, and very well highlighting two important points that the states which have high RE resources should also start looking into the balancing resources as part of their planning process. And second is need for a more coordination amongst various agencies so that the existing resources can be used for flexible operations in the future and prepare them for that. So thanks for your comments, Mr. Mehta. Let me move on to Gurpreet, who's been waiting patiently. Gurpreet, my question is about the market mechanisms, and globally these market mechanisms have played a very important role in providing the needed grid flexibility. Where do we stand in terms of these mechanisms in India, and how will these mechanisms help in integrating large RE in India?
Yeah, thanks, Anurag. And I think it's been an excellent discussion, and starting right from Mr. Narasimhan to Mr. Mehta, and of course Mr. Bhargava and Abhishek, and all of everyone's talked about the variability of RE and how to really get ready for managing that. And as Abhishek also mentioned, forecasting and scheduling is improving, but ultimately it still has an error. And that's true for RE wherever you have, you don't have RE or you don't have forecasting that you can make RE on its own dispatchable, at least for the near future. So in that context, while the technical ability of the system is important to be there, for the reserves to be there, the primary, secondary, slow and fast tertiary all have to be there. But then there's a role that markets play. And as you rightly said, internationally markets are playing a role in balancing RE. So, what is that role really? Theoretically, if you see, there is a cost to do all this balancing. There's a cost to do retrofits in generators. There's energy storage option, which we are exploring, but all of them has a certain cost. And the role that markets fundamentally play is to assess from different services that the grid needs, and we call it marketizing the grid. There are various services that grid needs, and whoever is best placed to provide that service at least cost while maintaining, very importantly, the system reliability is what technology that should actually win the race in the short term and in the long term. And that is the role that markets play to discover that technology, discover that price. If you look at flexibility needs are across the time spectrum. You need flexibility from very short duration, milliseconds, when you need your frequency control, your voltage management, to within the day, as you have solar peaking, to looking at little bit longer term, seasonal needs for flexibility, and then over the years, as systems change, your flexibility needs change. So for this, there are different types of markets, and each type of market really has a role to provide the type of flexibility that you need. You have seasonal markets, you have real-time markets, you have ancillary services markets, and some of them could be bilateral, like seasonal contracts, which today we are doing as banking. These are also a form of market, but they're bilateral. But closer to the time on day-ahead and RTM, these are more exchange-based markets, which effectively have provided an opportunity for RE to be integrated. So when we look at bringing RE to market, the way I look at it is essentially there are two things. One is bringing RE contracts to market, and second, market providing the services that RE needs, or the variability to manage the variability. So when we talk about bringing RE to market, we look at what internationally has been done, and there are various structures that have been followed where RE contracts have been brought to market. There are CFDs, which are financial contracts, and there are a variety of CFDs. There are two-way CFDs, one way with caps and with floors. And these CFDs, in a way, they work to ensure that RE, which has a fixed cost, is compensated for that through a CFD, while on the market it bids and gets the real-time price. So that kind of a mechanism, in brings RE to the market, where RE gets bid on the market. There is a clearing price together with the demand, and then based on the CFDs, these prices are then settled outside the market to make sure that the RE is compensated. Something similar like this, the MBED framework has already been talked about. The discussion paper is out there. It talks about thermal, but very easily that can be applied to RE. So there is a role, that how you bring RE to market, and then you have the RTM, you have the ancillary services market, and you have the day-ahead market. Effectively, these three markets have to operate in tandem and together with each other to provide the right signals. RE is not going to have the predictability of day-ahead market, which is why we've not seen RE bidding in this market, because there is a wide variation. Even after the scheduled revisions, RE still ends up paying the DSM charges, even though the bands are wide, which shows the challenges in forecasting. So real-time market, closer to real-time as balancing, will enable RE to come onto the market. And this will also mean, if there are ancillary services available at a market price, it will mean that you'll have capacity which knows what price signals are coming in the market, and therefore the investment in this capacity, whether it's thermal or energy storage, can happen to provide this flexibility. My last point is, so far we've seen that we have seen two recent bids from SECI where we had RE providing balanced power, one by Renew and Greenco, and one using battery storage and hydro. The question that I have is, right now we are asking the RE generators to balance and provide, but are they the best placed to actually provide this, or should this be a market service where balancing services can be provided by an entity which is best placed, and RE generators generate as per with better forecasting? So that's a question which needs to be answered, but effectively a market will enable different service providers to come in, and the least cost service provider to be able to offer that flexibility.
Thank you, Gurpreet, for your answer, and also highlighting the question around whether a RE developer should take up the responsibility of providing the balancing services, or there is a role for a additional service provider there. So I think we have gone through first round of questions, and I think this is the time for us to take some of the questions which we have received from the audience. And thank you, Mr. Mehta, for already answering the question around what are the benefits of like what are the profits we have drawn from the COVID thing. If I can kind of also ask Mr. Bhargava if you want to respond to this question, how much savings has been achieved during the lockdown period by the way of using renewable energy? If you have any thoughts to share on this question first.
Yeah, thanks, Anurag. I think Mr. Mehta did touch upon this question. And I think I mentioned to you separately that it's not a simple math problem, because the saving is not there because of RE per se. The saving happened because the demand collapsed, and effectively the coal cost was taken out of the equation. To that extent, there is some saving, that lower the demand, lower coal burning, and because RE was a must to a large extent, so that much saving was there. So I agree with Mr. Mehta, it's not a profit. It was saving in terms of how much coal was consumed.
Thank you, Mr. Bhargava. If I can stay with you, another question which we received from our participants is, what is being planned towards using hydrogen-based storage and using hydrogen as energy carrier across various sectors?
Actually, I'm happy to see a question on hydrogen, but hydrogen is a subject in itself, and I think all these guys would probably need to do another webinar on hydrogen separately. Having said that, hydrogen as a storage is something which is still in the works, because what we are looking at as hydrogen is not from the purpose of storage alone. We are looking at using green hydrogen, and when we say green hydrogen, because today hydrogen is being used in a variety of industries like refineries, fertilizers, and so on and so forth, and very large quantities. But all of that is produced using either coal or natural gas. So that's what is generally referred to as black or gray hydrogen. And when we say green hydrogen, we are looking at producing hydrogen from renewable sources only. The issue today is in terms of cost. The green hydrogen obviously is costlier vis-a-vis the black or gray hydrogen. But our intent is to slightly go very strongly to the green hydrogen space for 2 or 3 objectives. One, of course, is when we're talking about 450 gigawatts of renewable energy coming into the system, which you showed earlier when we started the session. I don't think, and I'm sure Mr. Narasimhan will agree with me, that 450 gigawatts of RE into our grid is a huge amount of flexibility. And I don't think with all the computing power POSOCO has, they'll be able to handle that kind of variability to the grid on a daily basis. So we feel having such large amounts of RE should not be pumped into the grid, and we need to find ways and means to use that RE, renewable energy. So hydrogen production is one area which we are looking at, so that we can produce hydrogen directly without having to use that power into the grid. And that hydrogen could be used for supplying to fertilizer, to refineries, or even for mobility, because in mobility terms, hydrogen carrier are supposed to be better vis-a-vis pure battery electric vehicles over long distances. To the question of using it for storage and for re-electrification, that's the term which is normally used. That's actually a relatively inefficient process. That is easily doable, but in terms of efficiency, that's less accepted. So from that angle, I'll say it's not a very effective way of using hydrogen.
Thank you, Mr. Bhargava. So moving on to another question from the participants, and this is directed to you, Mr. Narasimhan. You mentioned that there is a need for penetration at intrastate level for flexibility mechanisms. Example, thermal flexibility. Right now for the central level and the state level, intrastate. What is the next step from central level to incentivize the push into the state level? And maybe if Mr. Mehta, you would also like to respond to this question, how states can also kind of adopt some of these things at the state level, starting with you, Mr. Narasimhan, first. Can you hear me? You are on mute, Mr. Narasimhan.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Anurag. Actually, on the intrastate, there are several initiatives. One, of course, the CA is also working on this with several intrastate generators. We did have a series of tests done at the different intrastate plants through CA, and of course, this one through the USAID initiative also some tests have been done, and then GIZ and other agencies, they are also working. But the important point here is that through the forum of regulators also, we have been trying to emphasize that it's basically all the states, the SCRCs need to amend their grid codes, to allow for a minimum turn down level, to go down to 55, 40 or whatever, with a mechanism for compensation payments. Because actually the technical part is one thing, but then the whole issue has to be addressed from the economics side also. And that's the reason why, through the forum of regulators also we've been trying. The different reports which POSOCO has been working on. Last year we did a study on coal ramping, and just about a few days back, there was one on coal flexibility. How much is the minimum turn down level at different state level plants? How has it been behaving in the last 7 to 8 years? So that report is available. So the point is CA is taking initiatives. Then forum of regulators also have been trying to persuade the SCRCs that they amend the grid codes, the state grid codes. As far as the central sector is concerned, in the draft grid code that the CRC expert group had put out, there was a provision of going down further from 55 to 40%. So the compensation table and other aspects that were covered in the draft grid code. So these are the initiatives that are there.
Mr. Mehta, would you also like to respond to this question?
Sir, the Narasimhan sir rightly pointed out, only the thing is that today the state GENCO machine are having less PLF, hardly 40% around. Now, generally the SCRC may not allow the additional investment which is required for refurbishment to achieve the flexibility. Say we could do it practically for 2 machines in Gujarat, that means with the USAID help and other thing. So either the fund or such grant should come from the center or from PSDF, but we should accept that it is a need. Say state renewable energy which is tie up with the state DISCOM, and we need to have a flexibility to address that inflexibility or intermittency. So today whatever resource available with the state need to be more flexible. whatever regulatory support required, what Narasimhan sir said, has to be come forward through FOR and SERC, and the funding has to be done. Then and then we'll able to go ahead. Otherwise, what will happen, sir? It will be difficult to harness the quantum of RE which we have projected so far.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta. My next audience question is to Abhishek. The question is, what are some of the latest technological advancement in the grid for better load forecasting, grid planning, and balancing?
Yeah, if you talk about the forecasting tools that we used, I mean, in integrated resource planning, CA is also advocating. There are many. For example, one of the power optimization or the network optimization tool is OpenDSS, and there's so many softwares are there, like SOS. And CA is using, POSOCO they are using. In our case, for example, if you talk about distribution, we are doing the top-down approach in terms of load forecasting. So there are multiple regression equation based packages, or you say artificial intelligence and machine learning based packages, which are available and which improve with the passage of time. So gone are the days when we used to do the CAGR based or Excel based trend analysis something. So we have slightly moved ahead, and we feel that, for example, if you talk about day ahead forecasting MAPE, is close to 4% annual average now, and we are trying to breach that barrier subject to certain data conditions. For example, if you talk about the intraday forecasting or scheduling MAPE, as we say, we are close to 2% or even less than that. So in terms of high RE rich scenario, the intraday forecasting will also, I'm talking about the demand forecasting side, not the generation RE forecasting side. And that is going to play a very important role. So in a nutshell, yes, we are there in terms of usage of the AI and ML based regression equation, but then there are multiple algorithms which are available. And weather is also a challenge. Forecasting weather is also a challenge. So the fit of the equation to a particular state, or maybe within the state, if it is a huge one within certain region, is also a challenge. But then with the passage of the time, as the machine learning happens, the model becomes robust.
Thanks, Abhishek. There's also another question for you. Are we encouraging private big buildings like the high-rise buildings and industries to use solar panels to reduce their load of power demand?
Yeah, in Delhi, for example, Delhi solar policy doesn't have any upper cap on the rooftop solar size, subject to the technical limitation of the distribution transformers, for example. So we are promoting rooftop solar even in the C&I segment, where we see that the net demand from the grid can be reduced. We are trying to go a step further. We are trying to tell them that you install solar along with a battery storage also, because battery storage is not having the facility of central financial assistance as of now. And that CFA is also not available for C&I consumers. So that way we are saying, if you install that, and whether it makes an economic sense for you to participate in the demand response for us, because Delhi peaks in the night. Day peaking is rare now. So in this post-COVID also, we have seen that the night peak is peakier. One of the reasons is, of course, the residential load. Otherwise, also in normal years, also it is night. So we promote that, and for us, all the kinds of consumers, the residential or C&I consumers, they are equal. Promoting all the facilities, online facilities for onboarding of the consumers, application of the net metering, and facilitation of the same. In fact, we are also, in fact, C&I consumers don't need that kind of help, but we are now building up a portfolio in terms of tracking the generation of the rooftop solar and giving that value-added services to the consumer. That we are developing now, should be ready in the next 2-3 months. Wherein the generation tracking, because that there is a need for that. Just like you have REMC projects going on in India, Renewable Energy Management Center. There is a need for the distribution companies to forecast and track embedded solar. For that, forecasting and net demand forecasting is very, very important. So in a nutshell, yes, the answer is yes, and we are also aggressively pursuing solar as a demand response and DSM tool as well in the congested network areas.
Thanks, Abhishek. My other audience question is directed to Gurpreet, and this is about how much market interest you are able to see in the present ancillary mechanisms where there is no price discovery or no liability to pay for causing ancillary services?
Yeah, thanks, Anurag. And I think it's a good question, and perhaps I should have talked a little bit more about it. And I think there are two questions in that one question. One is about ancillary service market, and the other for price for ancillary service market and who pays for it. On the first question, perhaps as we all know, ancillary services market is not really a market at the moment. It's more, RRAS service where identified thermal generators are offering the ramp up and ramp down service for a fixed fee. And till the time it remains a fixed fee, it's not really a market service. We do understand though that ancillary service market is there is a discussion paper out on it, and there is a plan to bring a market. So once that comes up, then we expect anyone to be able to offer this service to a market, and the price getting cleared in the day ahead market, together with the energy and the co-optimized market, where it will be a co-optimized market or a separate market, we have to see. But it seems like there'll be a co-optimized market where generators could offer energy or capacity for ancillary services in the market, and the price clears. Once that happens, it will be more a price driven market, and then there'll be more interest, as I see. The second point actually is quite important, because I think the whole point about who pays for the ancillary services and whether the causer pays principle, is applicable or should it be applied. As we know that, RE essentially finds it difficult to be dispatchable, not just in India, but everywhere else. And what we have seen is that globally, RE is kind of given this subsidy that they don't really have to pay for the ancillary services or pay for the deviation they cause. RE is settled at real-time prices. So as long as RE gets real-time prices, and then there is a CFD mechanism, they are compensated. But effectively, where there is an ancillary services market, the other storage service providers or generators provide the balancing services for a price. In that context, it becomes viable because even if RE is not paying as a causer, whoever is providing this service gets the right price for providing this service. I hope I answered.
Thank you, Gurpreet, for clarifying this. I think important point to be clarified with the audience here. We have 2 more minutes, so I probably will take one more question, and this is for Mr. Narasimhan, and this is a repeated question, so I want to take it. So the question is about what are India's plans to build staff capability to operate the grid with RE integration, since the variables are too many? And there's also kind of a similar question to this is, how do you equip utility young workforce to manage RE dominated portfolio? Over to you, Mr. Narasimhan.
Yeah, thank you. On basically equipping the load dispatch centers, in fact, under the Forum of Regulators, there was a report where Mr. Mehta and I also, we happened to be a part of that committee. It was headed by Mr. S.K. Suniji. And we had done on capacity building of Indian load dispatch centers, what all needs to be done. So that report is available on the Forum of Regulators website. So all the specialized areas where we need a process of certification, training and certification, those have been identified. And we are working with NPTI and other institutes, how to have such programs, like on renewable energy itself, we organized 3 such programs over the last 1 year. And that was, that program was slightly different, in its structure, in that you had an online content first that all participants had to go through. And then we had a classroom training where we had the best of experts from all parts of the world come down. And IIT Bombay was the Indian partner. So that was quite successful. And we plan to build on this and have more and more of such certification related courses instituted. So that would be the first step. And coming to the issue of, the young workforce, yes, that's something which we recognize in POSOCO. POSOCO, today the average age is just 38 and it's going down sharply, as oldies like me, they would go out of the workforce in a few years' time. So and in some of the control centers, it's below 32. So we have this continuous challenge. Now, one thing that we have recognized here is that the youngsters who join the workforce, they love doing a challenging assignment, and it's up to us to throw them as many challenges as we can, and they always go one step forward, and the only issue is that we give them all the facilities in terms of institutional membership of institutes like SIGRE, IEEE, and all these standards, and they get an opportunity to work with different working groups, like POSOCO is part of the Geo15 group of large system operators, so there are many working groups, task forces where our executives get an opportunity to contribute. So that's the one way to keep giving challenging assignments and giving them all the facilities for interaction with their peers throughout the world, and that we have seen that pays in the long run. So that's how I feel that we can keep everybody motivated and ensure that this RE target we are able to fulfill successfully. Thank you.
Before I close to the webinar session, we have just 1 minute video to play. We'll be sharing some insights on the 17th edition of PowerGen India Indian Utility Week and Distributech India, which will be organized on the grounds of Pragati Maidan, New Delhi in January 2021. So I would request all of you to stay back for the video, and we look forward to join you in the next session.